So I found myself in a position recently where I was acting out old versions of myself and old patterns of myself to shrink myself down to appease certain relationships I had in my advice, rather than implementing a lot of the tools and the boundaries that I've managed to build and instill with other relationships in my life. So I thought I'd make a video today to remind you that there is no need to shrink yourself to fit into versions of yourself that once existed to maintain relationships in your life. And if those people in your life respect you and love you in the way that they say they do, then they will adjust. You shouldn't have to compromise your boundaries in order to maintain relationships with people in your life, especially old relationships. And I know for me specifically, it can be hard for me to uphold certain boundaries with people just because in the past, when I really cared about people, I would sort of create like a soft spot for them. And I would essentially just let them walk all over me, because they were someone that I cared about. I wanted to be there for them. And essentially, I believed that having no boundaries with the people that you love was the best way to show that you love them, which isn't true. And that love that you have for that person should be reflected in the boundaries that you have in that relationship and the structure that it's built on. One thing that I've noticed as I've continued to grow and I've continued to create healthy relationships in my life is that it's a lot easier for me to start a relationship with the foundation that I've gained and the knowledge that I have about setting boundaries and how to navigate relationships in a healthier way for both me and for the person that I have formed a relationship with, whether it's romantic or platonic. Because this current version of myself is so vocal about how I feel and what my boundaries are and what makes me feel comfortable, I feel like I've attracted a lot of people where I feel safe to express those boundaries to, and a lot of people that can maintain that same mutual respect. I know that they can come to me and I can come to them without feeling any type of pressure around saying no, any pressure around setting boundaries, and honestly just being honest and transparent about where we're at mentally and emotionally and how that may impact the relationship. And honestly, setting boundaries is still something that I really struggle with. I've changed a lot, and the person that I am today is vastly different than the person that I used to be. But I think when it comes to those intimate relationships in my life, whether it's platonic or romantic, I could still struggle with setting boundaries and not simply wanting to please the other person. And so I recently had a conversation with a friend, and I was explaining the situation with someone else in my life and how I essentially coddle them and I try to please them, and I put myself on the back burner and I put my own feelings and where I'm at aside to make sure that I maintained a positive relationship with that person, rather than simply just saying no and simply being honest with where I'm at and setting that boundary up. And it honestly kind of struck me when that person told me that it seemed like I was living out an old version of myself to please this relationship and please that person, because honestly, that's not how I had viewed it. I viewed it as me trying to look out and care for someone that I care about and wanting to be there for that person and wanting to be someone that they could rely on. And I had sort of taken myself out of the equation and put my own personal feelings on the back burner. And so that was just like a little mini wake-up call for me, just because I feel like when it comes to growth and as you're on this journey of bettering yourself and finding ways to self-regulate, sometimes you get to points where you feel like you've done the work and you won't have to worry about it again. But these things and these situations continue to come up, and it's about how you react to them and how you respond and whether or not you're able to maintain the awareness needed to even notice that the situation is happening. And so I thought I'd just make this video because I think sometimes you may feel like you need to shrink back down and you need to compromise your current beliefs and your current boundaries to appease that relationship. But it's not necessary. And it's important to recognize that if that person genuinely cares about you and they are receptive to who you are and your growth, then they will also change and they will adjust. And it might not be easy, you know, there might be some pushback, there might be some resistance. And I think that's natural because we naturally don't like to change. We find what makes us comfortable, we have our comfort zones, and when we're pushed out of it, oftentimes we freak out. And so it's not at anyone's own fault that this happens, but you have to recognize that if that person is not willing to change and adjust and see you for who you are, then you need to reassess that relationship. And as far as dealing with that situation where you feel like there's somebody that has either crossed a boundary or simply does not operate with the current boundaries that you hold because you've been lenient with them, for me, it was as easy as sending a text message, and this was an introduction to a conversation that is obviously much greater, but it was just me taking that initial step to form that boundary and to put my foot down and say, I can't do that. No, I can't do this. I don't have the energy for it. And I'd rather be honest with you than try not to step on toes. And that's all it took for me in this situation. Obviously, it was very small, and I know that there's a lot of you that are in much bigger, deeper situations that are a lot harder to navigate, but sometimes it just takes an initial action to set the whole thing in motion, and being true to yourself and remaining strong with your boundaries and what you need to see it through. And I think honestly, this is like a really interesting aspect in relationships, and it's something that I don't often see talked about, but we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving, whether it's for the better or sometimes for worse. And sometimes we're comfortable leaving different aspects of ourselves behind with certain relationships. And sometimes we just allow comfortability to guide us through certain relationships. And you may think it's not impacting you as a whole because usually you're still able to do the things that you want and allow different versions of yourself to exist with other relationships. But honestly, how much are you moving and how much are you changing if you're still anchoring yourself to past versions of yourself and old patterns? You know, it doesn't do you any justice to stay the same in some aspects and then actively try so hard to change in others. At some point, they're going to collide and you're still going to hit that friction wall. And that's kind of the position that I found myself in, because here I am trying to change and shift and pivot, yet I feel held back by the fact that I'm still catering to this specific relationship and still allowing it to dictate how I move rather than choosing how I want to move. So yeah, I thought I'd just make this video and kind of put it out there because I feel like there's a lot of pendulums of thought that go around, and I find that a lot of times my own emotions and the situations I'm in are reflected in you guys and reflected in conversations that are around me. So I thought I'd share this, and maybe it resonates with somebody out there who was feeling this way or needed to hear this. So yeah, I just wanted to say there's nothing wrong with creating boundaries with people and creating boundaries in relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic, and sticking up for yourself and doing what's right for you. I think that's all I want to say for now. So until next time,